Hi, everybody. So, instructions for Friday, November 4th for AP World History. What I'm going to ask you to do in class today is to give a first try at writing a long essay question, or what we call an LEQ. For this LEQ, we're going to drop back to information from Unit 2, which is all about the interregional trade, and hopefully it'll be a pretty straightforward question for you to take your first try at an LEQ for. So what I want you to do is take a look at the question, and you'll notice the beginning of the sentence says, evaluate the extent to which, and then the rest of the question follows. This is a very standard format for the LEQ because what it's asking you to do is to make an argument. You've got to make some type of judgment on the extent to which something caused something, something was similar, or something changed over time or stayed the same. So you've got to make a judgment call. So the first thing I want you to realize about the LEQ is I'd rather you make an argument than just report facts back to me. So that's the first thing about the LEQ. The second thing about the LEQ is that we are going to follow a very specific format. So we're going to do the LEQ right now. We're going to work on it in 4 paragraphs. So you're going to need a piece of paper. You're not going to do this on Canvas. I want you to write this out since we're most likely taking the test on paper. So the first paragraph is context. And what that means is you're going to spend about 3 to 4 sentences writing very specifically about the background to the topic of the question. So let's say the question was, and I'm going to simplify this, evaluate the extent to which government spending caused inflation during the Biden presidency. So the question is not how did government spending cause it? What the question is asking is how important was government spending to inflation? So obviously people are going to have different opinions on the extent to which that type of spending led to inflation. And that's where we develop arguments. So the context is to give a little background. So you would say something to the effect of, in 2020, President Biden was elected in a close election that led to the establishment of Democratic control of the presidency and of the Congress. During this control, the Democrats started to put in spending programs, particularly focused on providing relief during the COVID pandemic and also bringing about child care credits that extended to everybody's household. So right there, what I did was I just gave a little background that leads into the government spending. So what you want to do with context is just provide a background. That's the primary thing. And you want to make it specific, but you don't want to make it long. So usually 3 to 4 sentences. So there's a way to write this right now. You can hit pause on this video and then write out a contextualization paragraph for the LEQ. So you go ahead and pause, write for about 3 to 4 sentences, and then come on back for part 2. All right, part 2. So you do your first paragraph on context. Your second paragraph is going to be a thesis. And this is where you're going to advance a claim and then provide a line of reasoning. So if my claim is something to the effect of inflation was not primarily caused by government spending, that's a claim. I'm taking a position. So it's a position that could be argued one way or the other. But then I need to give a line of reasoning. In other words, I need to give a justification. So I could say inflation was not caused by government spending because the COVID pandemic had created a shortage of supply that drove prices up. So I'm giving the because in between the claim and the line of reasoning. So what you want to do is when you write your thesis, you want to separate it from the context and write a single 1 sentence, maybe 2 sentence paragraph. And that way we know it is distinctly the thesis. And your thesis is a position. It's not a reiteration of the question. It's a position in response to the question with a line of reasoning, with a justification. So why don't you go ahead and take a moment and write out your thesis for this LEQ. Okay, now we come to the third paragraph where we're going to make our argument. So this is where you're going to justify it. And you are not going to spend too much time defining the terms you use, but rather explaining how your viewpoint can be supported with details. So if I'm going back to the COVID example and I say the supply chain created the inflationary pressures, I could talk about how stricter regulations during COVID led to restrictions on people coming in to the ports of trade, which backed up ships, thus creating a restraint on the flow of goods into the United States. Now, that's an example of a piece of evidence, but it's not enough just to state the evidence. You have to explain how it would support your purpose. And the best words you can use is the word therefore. So when we make an argument, we have to make the connection. So, just to give you an example, if you come in late to my class and I say, I'm going to give you a detention, and you go, well, you shouldn't give me a detention. There's your claim, because something stopped me from getting to the class on time beyond my control. There's your line of reasoning. Then you're going to get into specifics. You're going to say, as I was walking down the hall, a fight broke out in front of me and a whole crowd of kids gathered around. Now that is a piece of evidence, but what you haven't done is argue with it. What you need to do is say, therefore, I was blocked from going down the hall that directly leads to your class, and I had to go a different way to get to your class, and that took me longer, thus I was late. So what you need to do is make that connection. So the third paragraph is going to be your argument. Now you can also make this a fourth paragraph, you can make this a fifth paragraph. There's no hard, set, fast rules. My advice to you is whenever you make a paragraph for your argument, just focus on one part of your argument. If you have two parts to your argument, then make it the second part a second paragraph. So this is the paragraph that you're going to show evidence and you're going to make your argument. So why don't you go ahead, press pause, and do that now. For our last paragraph, we're going to have a conclusion. Now the conclusion, there's a lot of flexibility here. There's nothing that says you have to do this, but what you want to do is use the conclusion to do one of two things. One, you can make a better thesis. Sometimes when you write these answers, you'll realize after the fact that you have a better idea of your argument than when you began. So when you look back at that thesis statement, you'll go, that's a lousy thesis statement. I can write a much better one. Now that's what your conclusion for. So you can just make your conclusion a restatement of your thesis, but make it better, more detailed, more enriching. The second thing you can do with your conclusion, and this is really kind of getting to an advanced level, is you can connect it to other time periods in history. So you can make a cross connection. You can say, what happened here is very similar or very different. You can connect this to outside things. Now that's getting more complex, which is something that some of you may not need to do. So with that, that's how you basically approach an LEQ. What I want you to do now is make sure you've written your LEQ, and I want you to hold on to it until I come back on Wednesday so that we can talk about it as a class and I can give you some more feedback in person. But just to reiterate, your LEQ is going to go in 4 parts. The first part is context. The second part is a thesis. When you write your thesis, you have a claim with a line of reasoning. Your third part is going to be your evidence. You're going to present your evidence. You're not going to describe your evidence as much. You're going to analyze the evidence and use it to advance an argument. And then your last thing is a conclusion. And in your conclusion, you can choose to either make a better thesis or you can connect it to something beyond the issue. You can make it an analogy to something else in history or in a different topic, different content. We can talk about that complexity later. That's the basic idea of writing an LEQ. So it should only take you about 20 minutes. You don't need to spend hours writing this stuff. So sometimes a long essay question, you think you have to write 45, 50 minutes. On the AP exam, you only have about 30 minutes to write the LEQ. So if you have any questions about it, just come in on Wednesday, have something to work with, have a context, a thesis, an evidence, and a conclusion. And then we'll talk about it, and you have a chance to make revisions as you wish. So that's it. Until then, be good. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.